Everything is happening through these screens.
How are we getting the most out of that person?
I want to see this thing grow long term.
Amazing story. You have such a unique perspective on that.
Schedule a 2-week vacation.
I applaud those models.
Undervalue.
Secure your digital footprint as well.
Why were they even put in place in the first place?
Only the most adaptable survive. Let's get to the leaders list.
Every founder has a story, but it doesn't always become a book that'll save you about 6 figures in legal fees. Todd Stanton built Stanton Law to help fast-growing companies stay out of court, and along the way, turned that into a playbook called the 95% rule. So we're going to cover why 95% of your team is solid, but the other 5% can burn it all down. We'll talk about the legal traps that you should be aware of before they cost you. And we'll talk about the 29 simple axioms that every founder should know before they scale. I'm Bryon Morrison. Let's get to the leaders list.
Okay, Todd Stanton, thanks so much for being on the leaders list.
Glad to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. So Todd, Stanton Law you've had for, I think it's 24 years, right?
14 years, 2011. You're a decade ahead.
I'm a decade ahead. I'm giving you benefit of the doubt. There's no doubt that's going to happen.
Certainly feels like.
Right. So tell us a little bit about Stanton Law, just so we can put this in context, because in the leaders list, we get advice from people who are actually in the mix and they're doing the work. So tell us a little bit about the firm and where you're at in your growth stage.
So thanks. I founded Stanton Law in 2011. I had come out of 9 years of big law. The origin story is pretty neat, and the fact that I had kicked around the idea of partnership at large law firms. I had a mentor tell me that when I was asking her what's it take to make partner at a big law firm, 1,200 global lawyers, what's it take to make partnership here? And she said, you're asking the wrong question. She said, you need to, instead of asking what it takes to make partnership here, you should be asking what it takes to build a practice to make partnership inevitable. And I thought that the light bulb went off, and I said, okay, I'm self-employed, whether I'm walking up and down the hallways of a big law firm, whether I'm doing it by myself, whether I'm in a boutique. And I recognized that I could not build the practice I wanted to build at a global law firm. I'm an employment lawyer. Nobody graduates first in their class and goes into employment law. This is not rocket surgery, what my main area of focus has been. And so I decided then at that point that I knew I wasn't going to be able to build it at that large law firm. So I started asking people who had done it what happened, what they would do differently when they went out and started their own firm. And everybody I spoke with said that they would have done it earlier. So that's pretty good indication that it was time for me to move. They also said that they would have saved more money, which was nice to have. And then at that point, I recognized that nobody ever went back, and that if I wanted to, I could. Right. So they will always need grist for the mill in Midtown. And when I point back behind me, Midtown Atlanta, where all the big law firms are just on the other side of that window. I don't have to go there anymore. So I started my own firm. Was going to do HR management representation for employment law issues, and that was going to be it. I knew how many hours I needed to bill at what rate in order to meet my family's income needs, and started chugging, and very quickly realized that I was better at selling the work than doing it. I did not enjoy the types of things that I was grinding out at times. So I hired an associate in 2012, and I've been chasing overhead ever since. We are now at 17 lawyers. I would say about half of our revenue still comes from management side representation on the employment issues. The other half is split between a very capable transaction group, as well as 3 bulldog litigators who pick up where our counseling efforts come up short. So we pride ourselves on being an employee-first organization. We want our folks to lead fulfilling and sustainable lives, both in and out of work. And so that requires sort of a sacrifice a little bit on the profitability and on the revenue side, because we want people to attend soccer practices and plays and be good husbands and dads and wives and moms. So it's been a good run as we come up on our 14th, just finished our 14th year.
That's awesome. Congratulations. Was there, going back to that point about you recognizing that you're not necessarily, you're better at selling it than doing it, Was that a personal realization, or did you? I know you were a college athlete, and you've benefited from great coaching. Did you have a coach before, or did you bring in outside counsel to help you in any way, or was that just a realization?
That was a realization for me, and it's interesting you bring up the coaching and that more contemplative and intentional process of what it is you're good at. I'm kind of late to that game, and I can talk more about that in a minute.
Sure.
But the fact of the matter was, I just recognized that work was piling up on my desk as I tended to focus on other things. And I don't necessarily enjoy the hunt. I enjoy relationship development.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to grind out another version of an employee handbook and build relationships all at the same time. So I found myself wanting to be out in the field, meeting people and finding out what their needs are. And then I found a very capable associate at the time. She's a partner with me now, Liz Ziegler, who picked up and did that work. She was very good, and she had the attention to detail that I lacked. So rather than trying to fit my square peg in a round hole, I went out to my highest and best use, which was developing those relationships.
Well, that's smart. I mean, it says a lot about your own understanding of yourself, because a lot of professionals, they just think that they have to be everything. They have to be the practitioner. They have to be the expert, and they are less than if they just go focus on their strengths. And so that's good that you learned that early.
I did learn it early, and I now advocate it from a much better position of having been informed. Jay Sheedy, I heard him say that my limitations are another person's purpose. And one of our common friends, Greg Alexander from Collective 54, he introduces the concept of a founder bottleneck. And if I want to recruit and retain high potential attorneys or staff or anything else, but I'm the only one making decisions, I'm the only one taking responsibility, I'm the only one taking a risk, those people are going to go someplace else. Either they're going to find their own shop, but I have to get out, or they're going to go someplace that the founder gets out of the way. And I don't want to be that founder bottleneck. One of our initiatives over the past couple of years has moved from being founder-centric to firm-centric. And that requires me to let people fill those purposes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you're an interesting firm and an interesting guy in the fact that I love that your big focus of promotion right now is helping other people spend less money on legal support.
Yes.
I just recently wrote a book, The 95% Rule, and love the book. Tell us a little bit about like what inspired that, and why did you get to that point where you felt like you had to, cut your staff's earnings?
Well, we've always run pretty lean with respect to that, and I think that it's born of laziness, quite honestly, both the book and the approach, right? And if I can find a more efficient way to solve a problem, and it costs you less money, then I think everybody's happy. So that's where that came about. So the 95% rule, from a substantive standpoint, arose out of a presentation that has become sort of my go-to presentation, in which I go over 29 things that I have found to be true in employment law. And if clients will understand and accept that these 29 things are immovable for all intents and purposes, then the more that they can focus on the things they can change. One of my business development mentors and influential in writing a book, a guy named Scott Miller, talks about move the movable. And so if you take the 29 things that are in the 95% rule that I think are intractable, I don't think that you can get around them. 5% of employees cause 95% of the problems. You're more likely to do something stupid after you drink 3 beers. No jokes are funny in front of a jury. These sorts of things, once you accept those things as true, then we can go over on focus the things that we have control, a little more control over, and focus on our circle of influence, not just our circle of concern, like Covey says. So that became the topic of the book, and I've been doing this forever. It was just getting those things on paper that the book was there, and that was also born out of laziness. I spend most of my time arguing with clients about why these things do apply, and so we can have a $700 an hour discussion on why you don't think they apply, or you can spend $31.99 on a book and read that I take it so seriously. I spent all of that time to write it, so you don't have to spend the money on it.
Yeah, yeah. It's not just a stump speech for the sake of hearing yourself speak. So let's just start off with the 95% versus 5% rule, right? So I found that really interesting because we all tend to fall into that trap of worrying about and paying attention to that 5% of staff that are really the squeaky wheel and the real challenge. And then it was kind of interesting to me because your perspective is like, what if we just paid attention to the good ones?
Mhm.
And it was almost like reading Clifton's Strengths Finders for the first time, where I was like, right. I mean, like some things I can't fix, so let's pay attention over here. But
Most good ideas are pretty simple at the end of the day.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's the mistake I see so many people making. And it's a matter of wanting to be right. Another great business development mentor I had, Steve Sunshine, he talked about the deliciousness of being right. And so where we face an employment law problem where somebody's accused our client of being a bigot or a misogynist or not paying them properly or retaliating against them for some reason, that's an insult. And they want to prove that they didn't do that. They want to clear their name. And my point is that I don't think that you can ever convince one of the 5%ers in that instance that they're gonna that you are what they say you are, or not what they say you are. And so once we recognize that we're not going to convince them, we can move on to the productive point, move the 5%er on out to a different opportunity. Maybe they find their purpose elsewhere. You're doing them a favor as well, believe it or not. And we can take whatever we were going to spend on Stanton Law and put it towards the 95%, the people who show up at work on time, they do their best effort, they make us money, and then they go home and don't really cause us problems. And if we can put our resources towards them rather than the ones who we were trying to get rid of and put it in a rearview mirror, then better off.
yeah, it's the locker room cancer, right? I mean, once you recognize that, you can start to build culture together. So let me just go back to you for a second before we start talking about it, because I think the axioms are fantastic. It's great for us just to be able to go into like some of those things. But for your own firm, you talked about how you came to this a little bit later in terms of shifting the organization, eliminating the bottleneck, and you're still working on some of those things. What growth stage would you say Stanton Law is in today? How would you describe it?
Oh, man, I don't know. That would sort of presuppose that any of us know what we're doing, right? I mean, I have a plan for what it is. I need to make more money, right? Which is not always consistent with the advice we give. But in terms of the scale, I am doing my best to scale. I'm doing my best to find repeatable processes so that people can enjoy more of their day without grinding it out. I am a big habits and routine type person. My days are fairly regimented with respect to things. And I don't spend a lot of time I don't waste a lot of energy making decisions on what I'm going to do next. I have it all laid out pretty consistently. So as I try to move into a scale stage in which we get things that are easily repeatable with less effort, providing the same value, mind you, but increasing the margin from driving our cost down because we're finding efficiencies in doing the same thing over and over again, because a lot of what we do is repeatable, right? There's certainly colors and the facts for a litigation case or the particulars of a specific deal, but we ought to be able to squeeze out efficiencies that, quite honestly, we're not great at right now, right? Everybody wants their situation to be bespoke and get very individualized attention from an attorney. There's a middle ground between reinventing the wheel every time and capitalizing on what we've done a lot before. So I hope that answers the question as far as I think we're in a scale stage, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because, a lot of the leaders that we work with, we'll see them go through these natural stages of operating in the business where they are, what we talked about earlier, where they're the practitioners and they're the ones that, are the expert, and you need to be that expert in the early stages. And then the next natural one is leading the business. So you move from operating the business to leading the business. And then we kind of talk about transforming the business. That's when you put a great leadership and team in place, and then you can start actually putting those processes in place, and you can let them manage those, and that's that transformation stage that really sets you up for being able to scale. So
It is
that makes perfect sense. You know,
It's
what's
finding
your goal?
it's finding people who share your values. It's finding people who are aligned with you in order to do it. And that would be another thing that we're tackling this year. I mentioned earlier our why about sustainable and fulfilling lives. I mentioned that just a second.
Yeah.
And what we've noticed with respect to this is that those are laudable goals to be sustainable and fulfilling. What we figured out is it's so subjective, particularly the fulfilling part, that it's difficult to be a North Star for an organization. And so as we move into 26, we're going to be talking about we need to be sustainable and profitable first, right? And generate our nest egg, not at the expense of being fulfilled, but for the purposes of being fulfilled, right?
Yeah.
And recognizing that our alignment point is that profitability piece. We can all work towards in our different roles being profitable first, so that we can then branch off with a more subjective idea of fulfillment on the other side. What jazzes up Ashley across the hall or Maxine across the hall is different from what I enjoy. But unless we have a nucleus of a profitable firm first, that fulfillment's much more difficult to come by because we don't have any money in our pocket. Right. So I think that's, figuring out how to find the points of alignment in a business as you're scaling, that's there, and making sure that your mezzanine leadership team or your fellow leaders are pulling in that direction is critical.
Yeah, that's great. There's so many organizations that talk about the importance of culture and getting that right. And you have such an interesting perspective on it with employment law. Like you know the power of culture. How do you go about measuring, what's the metric associated with culture and fulfillment? Certainly you just talked about your economic engine is driven on, like, you have to be a profitable organization. But how do you start to know when you have really made an impact with fulfillment?
I think you see it in lack of turnover, right? Would be one.
Sure.
Right?
Retention.
That's part of it. You see it where they're building camaraderie and relationships among the team, right? And that's always a work in progress. In any community that you put together, you're going to have people who see politics differently, or roles differently, or wealth differently, or anything else. But where you start to see people bridging those gaps and getting along, it's nice. We actually we have what we call a why survey at Stanton Law. So I got tired of seeing, and all the legal rags, all of the big firms pushing out their profits per partner, and the revenues are up to this, and how much money everybody is making. And it's unfair to compare my boutique firm to that on an absolute scale. We'll never be where Alston Bird or Weil Gottsall is with respect to those things. But it is important to come and say there's another half to the Stanton equation. And so we started asking questions. Do you feel like you have control over when and how you do your work? Are you comfortable saying no to a partner or a client, or at least not now on these things? Do you have a tolerable amount of work on your desk right now, either too much or not too much and not too little? And so we started asking these very subjective questions to show that there's another half to this, or another part to this, whether it's half or not, I don't know. And so we started measuring culture with respect to the things that we think are important towards that fulfilling part of the life out there. And, we're consistently, if we're rating it from a 1, we strongly disagree, to 10, strongly agree, we're up in the 9s on the culture type questions that we're asking here. And that balances out for an observer. Yeah, they don't have a profit per partner for this, and none of our attorneys have 4 homes, but they do love their wife. They do get to go home and see their kids, right? So that's important to me in that regard.
That's great. That's really smart. I mean, just to ask the question, right? It's amazing to me how many people talk about culture and don't go through the basics of, let's just ask the question. And then, if that starts with an annual survey, some sort of employee satisfaction, then, you can start to apply that same kind of mindset around, how did we do on this project? And how did you feel on, in this case and with this specific situation? And so you can start to get it down to a more laddered up environment where the data is serving each other.
I would agree with that. And I think that I'm going to say alignment again, Making sure that people are aligned, and you can bear almost anyhow if your why is strong enough, and if you're aligned towards the right one, the right goal. I think we pull a lot more in. And so knowing that me and the others here favor that balanced integrated lifestyle and are willing to make a little bit of the sacrifice on the income side in order to have a more fulfilling life on the other, that's how I'm going to measure the culture.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so today, Todd, what's on your leaders list? As you're scaling, you're going through standardizing the processes. What are the top couple things on your leaders list that are constantly running through your brain?
Well, we just had our annual meeting last week, and if you can't
that time of year, right?
Yeah, it's that time of year. We had a good meeting and came out of with I'm not going to call it a reorg, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I don't know when you're going to release this podcast, but the team wouldn't know what in the world I'm talking about if they see this before we announce it. So we're going to be pushing into a little bit more goal oriented towards revenue numbers. That is, for me, what drives this firm. Because of our model, we are a very revenue hungry firm, and we operate pretty lean with respect to the margins. So making sure that I have enough revenue at the end of any measuring period is critical. Putting our group into teams in order to see whether we can bounce some of the compounding, where we have people who are better at the work, people who are better at the revenue, combining those forces. We'll see how that works. So a little bit of a reorg, a little bit of a departure from the way we've done business in the past, but that's on the top of my leaders list, is figuring out. I'm more on the messaging side. I have an integrator who's more on the nuts and bolts side of this. So
perfect. Yeah. So I would imagine, building that marketing and sales engine to be able to continue driving those revenue numbers up will help. And you're well on your way with this great book. So that's really helpful. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that has certainly been something that has generated new opportunities. The book process has been fun. The book process has been worthwhile, and it is neat to see that catching on as a introduction to show some seriousness, quite honestly, in the way that we approach it. So
yeah,
I'm
sure you thought it was really fun, kind of like pulling your fingernails out while you were writing it. That had to be a blast.
I got better at it. I certainly became a more effective and more efficient writer when I figured out how much I was self-editing, and I just let it go. There were times when I was like, I wish I hadn't started this. That's for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's shift into talking about the 95% rule, and just if I'm a business leader and I'm starting to think about how do I'm in the same place you are. I'm building out my leadership team. I've got, a couple hundred employees, and I want to make sure that I'm setting myself up for success. What should be on their leaders list, based on the things that you've seen?
Well, I found, so the 95% rule and the 29 axioms that come out of it, first of all, they provide a great training tool for this, right? So it interjects a lot of employment law knowledge without some pencil neck standing up in front of them with a slide deck going through what the Fair Labor Standards Act says, or what the Family Medical Leave Act says, or why you shouldn't discriminate against somebody. Nobody thinks that stuff applies to them anyway. Their eyes gloss over, and they're looking for thinking of all the work they're missing while they're in the training. So this is a sort of a spoonful of medicine, a spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down, to help them understand an issue spot for employment law. I think the other thing that it does is it helps provide a standard lexicon, a standard language across the organization. So when all the managers and leadership understand what a 5%er is, and once they start identifying them, that is they don't lack for words in order to communicate more effectively. It helps people understand how employment law fits into the business. And nobody goes to start a business and says, my goal is to have 125 employees. That's not on the list of anybody's goals. The employees are an afterthought towards all of the other considerations, the client service, the product development, all of these, you need the people in order to do it. And I think that causes a lot of problems, and that people think of employment law as an afterthought as well too. We'll run it like a family. Everything is going to be okay. I'll treat them fairly and they're going to be good. I don't think you necessarily have to have malevolence among your employee base to have problems, right? So one of the hallmarks of one of the facts of 5%ers is it's not that they are all conniving, villains with respect to it. Some of them are hapless. Their car batteries really do die more than anybody else's. Their pets get sick, their kids get sick, their parents get sick more than anybody else's. The point, though, is if you don't understand that you still have to deal with that, it is not your problem, that it is your problem only in the sense that you have to find a solution for them, you're going to drive yourself crazy, no matter what the size of the community is. So understanding what it is that you can control, understanding what the things you can't control, I think that nowhere is that more important than the employment realm and the HR realm.
And do you find, so in most organizations that you work with, give us an idea of like the ideal type of client for you.
We are somewhere, our ideal client is, as a company, is somebody with more than 100 employees, probably $2 to $10 million worth of revenue would be really our sweet spot. We can help bigger companies that we can certainly help a little. But when I come down to identifying my ideal client profile, it's leaders and executives who have an open mind towards business solutions, not legal problems, right? It is people who are continuing to search for business issues and see their legal provider as one tool in their tool belt, right? So, and I look at my firm the same way. Our HR counseling, to me, helping you solve a problem before the litigators get involved, is so much more effective than the dispute resolution process on the other side of it. And if I can reduce things to cost benefit analysis and a return on investment, that is a language that business leaders speak. And that's our ideal client profile. Somebody who's willing to give me a bit of an audience to think it's not just who writes the best briefs. It's not just who makes the best opening and closing arguments. It's who helps me avoid that, because a closing argument is $250,000 later. If they have in-house counsel, it is business in-house counsel. It's somebody who's reviewing contracts. It's somebody who's reviewing regulatory things. It is somebody who they've decided that they get more bang for their expense buck bringing that lawyer in-house, because probably their business. It's only the largest of companies that we work with who have specific labor and employment counsel on something like that. So typically, I mean, we might be working with general counsel, but it's not their specialty. But most of the time we're dealing with somebody and wanting to be their outside legal advisor, their outside in-house lawyer, for lack of a better term.
Okay.
And in my experience with this, most of the time, these owners and executives are their own worst enemy, right? They've pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. They know their stuff. They've gotten along on all of these other issues by either grit or their gut, things of that nature. And they don't want to acknowledge that there's another way to thinking about it. So if I can take what I know where I know they need to go, and put it into the language that they are most comfortable with, which is the business language, again, ROI and cost benefit analysis, I'm a better provider of legal services in that regard. So,
and Todd, how do you specifically do that? Like, how do you get in front of the issue? And I know the answer is probably like, hey, you guys read the book first. But seriously, I mean, like, how do you know when it's going to happen? Can you kind of work with clients and understand when they're in a tipping point that this is likely to happen? Do you look at the personalities of the individuals? Do you set up ongoing counsel and training?
Proactively selling legal services is really, really difficult to do. Right.
I would imagine so. That's why I was like, how do you possibly?
It is necessarily not necessarily. It is presumptively a reactive process. Right. So especially on the defense side, right? I'm waiting for a demand letter. I'm waiting for a agency charge. I'm waiting for a complaint. I'm waiting for a deal to come in, right? And then we respond to that. Selling that is very difficult because I then have to be top of mind for all of our clients all the time. David Ackert, our Collective 54 colleagues, brings up that about 70% of professional services decisions are made based upon the last contact they had with a professional services provider. So if that's the case, being in front of them all the time is impossible, right?
Yeah.
And so getting to where I take a client who's come to us with a demand letter, and then getting my nose under the tent to be in their leadership meetings, to have strategy calls along those lines in order to anticipate the next one is where we go with that. That's a process, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's also the case that I have another adversary in this. So the easiest example I'll give is a restrictive covenant. And this is the best way to see this. So I was representing a small bank, and small bank went to big bank and takes 3 loan officers out of the big bank. The big bank goes bananas. They file a lawsuit. They send a team of lawyers after us. It was an aggressive posture for big bank to take. We finally got them to mediation, and the allegation was that these loan officers were taking their clients and their portfolios over to small bank. Right? Bank president mediation is willing to entertain a business proposition. And when big bank makes the demand, they want $400,000 to settle this case. And my client calls me outside and he says, take the deal. And I said, slow down, man, let me do my job. And he said, no, these guys are going to make me $4 million over the next 3 years. I will spend $400,000 today to make $400,000 every day of the week. Right? That's perfect for me. And that light bulb went off in my head. That's what this is about. If you give me the business answer to this problem, we never get to the point where we're arguing in court about these restrictive covenants are enforceable, whether we actually engaged in the behavior that they're alleged to have engaged in. We're just taking it to a business deal, and I'm helping him buy $4 million worth of revenue for $400,000 today. Business owners will understand that. And they will see that once we start doing it. We could pick almost any issue that comes across our desk to say, what's the best answer? The end goal of this is a resolution. What's the best way to get there? It's probably not buying Stanton a new boat while we're on our way to that journey, right? Or on our way to that destination. So, boy, how do you proactively sell that? It takes an open-minded executive. That's where we're trying to get to. Somebody who's willing to explore it differently with me for a minute.
Well, I would imagine that, with the book, that almost gives you like a product-based way to come in and at least start with an organization to talk about, the basics, right?
Well,
I'm sure I'm introducing you to stuff you've never thought of before, Todd.
Well, that is a glass half full approach to this. And it is amazing. This is the second time this has come up, but laziness carves a pretty persuasive stream through my existence. And again, I get tired of arguing with clients about this. So please read this book and then come argue with me about my point of view on this, right? Once you have my frame of reference, maybe your frame of reference will become clearer, and vice versa. I'm happy to entertain what it is that you are telling me, but quite honestly, I've seen this movie a lot. And rather than wasting the time you telling me why you're terminally unique, please entertain something that you haven't seen before, and I will too. Maybe you can convince me, and then there would be plenty of time for me to bill you for all my time at that point. But let's try something else first.
Yeah, it does make sense. I mean, it's such a challenge. I thought about you quite a bit before we were getting ready for this, because I did think to myself, like, law is not something that people think about being preemptively, in front of and solving. But do you work with like HR practitioners and partners, and so that they can come in and recognize like this is a good opportunity to bring in Stanton?
I certainly like the allies of HR, my HR folks. What I've found with the HR folks is they are looking for a bad cop. So an HR professional or even in-house legal counsel, they typically have an owner or a board above them who is likely trapped in a more traditional, our lawyer's better than your lawyer type mindset. Right. Mm-hmm. And we can outspend you on this, and we can try, which we may ultimately get to. But if I can go in and be the bad cop, let the HR professional or in-house legal preserve their business relationship with their direct reports going up, and help them manage up, and help their bosses get to see my perspective on this. I'll take the slings and arrows. Nobody likes their lawyer anyway. They're outside counsel anyway. Everybody thinks we charge them. So I'm not losing a relationship there. by protecting the ones who are closest to it. So yes, we love a good HR professional. We love a good in-house lawyer who's willing to bring us into the arena to fight with somebody who they think is making a poor decision.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about of the axioms that you've identified, which ones have you found are I know they're probably equal balance, but are there ones that you look at and you go, for God's sakes, if you're not going to read the book, just read this one?
Yeah, I would the first one is that 5% of employees cause 95% of the problems from a holistic standpoint, recognizing that you've got a cadre of folks who are doing their jobs fine and making you money and focus on them. Please do that. Right. That would be the number one. I think the other one is to recognize that there aren't really tricks to employment law. Right. That I can't make a position exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act. It's either exempt or it's not. I can't make an employee, somebody who is a W-2, appropriately classified as a 1099 contractor, right? So I'm a professional. I'm not a magician, and so I can't do things that slide on the other side of the law. Now that being said, and I'll come back to another one in a second, I can't put you in employment law jail. I'm just giving you the options and giving you, here's what happens if you do it my way. Here's what happens if you don't do it my way. But I'm not reporting you. I'm not turning you into the employment law police. So I recognize my role as a service provider, not the owner of your company. Right. Mm-hmm. So that was one. And I would say, please, please, please recognize that employment laws are not here to make your business easier to run. Right. They don't comply with common sense all the time. And so it's employee-friendly turf, right? And so accepting that you are going to lose, that as soon as the process starts in this, you're going to be writing checks. Unfair doesn't mean illegal, but it doesn't matter to your checkbook. And when you run into an employment law situation, that's an employment law situation with which you have to deal. So again, it's a lot of hitting people between the eyes with things they know. They just don't want to acknowledge them, I think.
Yep, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So for the SMB leaders that are building their companies, they're scaling, they're getting underway, and they want to build a human-centered workplace today. I've just listened to this. I know I'm going to go read the book, but what are 3 actionable things that you would say, get these things on your leaders list tomorrow?
Treat your employees like humans. That they are people with lives and feelings and needs. Your work, they will never be as invested in your business as you are, right? And so recognizing that it is probably just a job to them, and making sure that they understand that they're appreciated and have the freedom to keep other things in line at home and everything else. So
can I ask you a question there, Todd?
So
what do you do in an environment where, I know you do some coaching as well. So, with an executive who you say, listen, recognize they're human beings. Some people aren't good at recognizing that, right? They came up through the ranks because they were an expert at doing something, and they aren't that good at taking the time to recognize that. How do you help them past that?
The first stop on all of those journeys is getting them to read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. That has become sort of my interpersonal Bible. And when we start talking about principle-centered relationships rather than just the beatings will continue until morale improves type approaches, that is a huge hook to getting them to see that there's a better way to do things. Some of it's life is too short. Some of it is take care of people, do unto others as have them do unto you. Those sorts of things. Covey is a great way to interject that sort of compassion into this, and then also the advocacy for courage to make tough decisions. Right. So that would be that would be my first stop, is to get them to see that they're treating employees like humans is going to pay dividends, because you're going to ultimately have more loyalty.
Yeah, and there's literally a business benefit to
Yes.
a more loyal customer, like a literal financial benefit on multiple levels. So if people don't understand that, they should go look it up. There's too much stuff out there to.
I would agree with that.
But let's go into the second thing. I interrupted you.
No, so I think that the second piece that any manager can do is I preach transparency. I have to have people understanding in my business how their role fits, why the staff member who doesn't make as much money as a senior partner is still critical to operations. Where is he or she laying? Where are they contributing the value to this? You know, the old parable about the guy who's just laying one rock on top of another, and he's going at a snail's pace for it. And they said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm putting one rock on top of another." Next guy's going a little quicker, and they said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm building a wall." Well, the guy who's moving the fastest and really doing the best job, you ask him what he's doing. He says, "I'm building a cathedral." And so letting them in on the plan for this and seeing how they fit and seeing how their individual contribution factors into the whole for the sustainability and the profitability so that we can go enjoy these things later, I think is an important part, right? And then the last one I would say is you've got to walk the walk, right? You've got to be able to take the risk. We pride ourselves on deep, meaningful relationships here, and I'll make myself vulnerable first, and I'll take a bunch of risks and letting people in order for them to hopefully reciprocate that trust on the way back. That's a tough one for those crusty owners that you're talking about. You know, whether their mom didn't love them or their dad was too hard on them, whatever the case is, we've got to get through that bullshit in order to say, now we're dealing with something else. We're dealing with a new paradigm, in my opinion, that relationships are gonna be paramount. I'll also point out that I'm a big agency fan, and I think that people need to recognize that if they don't like something, they should change it. Right? That flows into happy people or better people, and you're more likely to do kind and generous things when you're happy. So let's do what we can to make ourselves happy. Utilize that agency to make good things easier, and then find a certain happiness on the other side. Bosses can apply that paradigm as well.
I love it. Todd, you can see how our listeners and viewers are going to understand that Stanton Law is very different. This is probably not the typical kinds of legal discussions we'd be having, but I just love, realize they're humans, offer transparency toward the vision so everybody can, understand and move that much faster and walking the walk. That's some great legal counsel.
Thank you. Yeah, if you want a more traditional approach, if you want a lawyer that doesn't have 4 dogs running around their office, there's lots of those lawyers out there. Right? Find the one that fits.
That's great. Well, thanks for adding to our leaders list, but giving us the right stuff to put on it. This has been great, Todd.
Well, a fun conversation. I appreciate you having me, Bryon.
Thanks.